Hello, we're here with Abigail Doerr. She's running for King County Council District 4. Would you like to go ahead and give a 2-minute introduction?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for having me here tonight. So my name is Abigail Doerr. Oh, wow, there's a time for it. I'm running for King County Council Position 4. I'm a renter, I am a transit rider, and I moved to Seattle about 10 years ago to work in an organization called the Washington Bus. So I moved up in Seattle organizing as a volunteer, registering young people to vote. I grew up in Spokane in a 3-generation household. My dad is a union community college teacher, and my parents raised my sisters and I, while also taking care of my elderly grandfather, which really led me to make sure that we're caring for our communities and caring for the people we love. And I've spent my career doing just that. And you all may not know me in particular, but you know my work because you've been a part of it. I most recently led Initiative 1631, the state's most ambitious, the country's most ambitious effort to lead on environmental policy that's equitable and includes folks, communities of color. I led with you all the Sound Transit 3 ballot initiative to make sure we were connecting our region with high capacity transit. I led a bus measure a few years ago to bring more bus service to the city of Seattle. And to do that, I brought together coalitions of labor, communities of color, and that is the type of energy we need on the county council. We have serious challenges that are ahead of us, from homelessness and housing, to transit and transportation, and on climate. And the urgency at the county council is not there. And we need energy, we need new energy to come in and really tackle these difficult challenges in the same approach that we've done before on all of these issues. To bring together coalitions of Democrats, communities of color to really take on these challenges. And I'm really eager and excited to do that with you all.
Thank you. So now you're able to flip over the sheet there in front of you. And Lori, I believe you were next.
I am. What are your goals for regional transportation and how will you work with other jurisdictions to achieve them?
Yeah, so one of the big reasons I'm running is because an initiative that I worked on in 2014 that you all supported is expiring at the end of 2020. And if you all remember, it was the Seattle Transportation Benefit District Proposition 1, quite the mouthful. And it's expiring, and there is no plan countywide to date for how we're going to replace that. I worked at Transportation Choices Coalition for many years and was pushing Metro to form a regional plan, but I think we really need leadership to map out a regional plan to replace this expiring measure. There are huge inequities in our transit service region-wide. Transit service in Seattle is not the best in the world, but it's pretty good and much better than it was, and much better than when you leave the city of Seattle. And we really need new energy and leadership to tackle this because it's just not happening right now in the county council. And it's one of the big reasons why I'm running, and one of the biggest things we can do to really address climate change and address clean air and clean water. Transportation is the biggest emitter of pollution in King County, and there is no plan, there's no effort from our council right now to really replace that and really think how we're going to do that. There's also a bunch of in-the-weeds things we can do that I could go on for hours and hours on, but I can't cover it in 34 seconds. Around fare box recovery rate and how we're making sure our major employers are providing transit passes for their workers. Everything to how we're providing bilingual, there's so many languages in King County, and making sure that we have materials and languages that are accessible. So Metro, it's 21% of the county's budget, and a huge, huge opportunity for the council to lead on and that's what I'm really excited to tackle.
Thank you.
Let's go ahead. Alice, would you like to take the next one? Sorry.
What are your priorities for managing the county budget? What are some steps the county can take to make its tax code more progressive and fund more of our public services?
Yeah, I like this question. So, first of all, the thing we all know in this room is we have the most progressive tax system in the country, and it is unacceptable. And we have the wealthiest people on the planet living in King County, and some of the most egregious homelessness, some of the most egregious poverty, and that is simply unacceptable. That being said, I have more or less spent my career year convincing people to increase their taxes and raise revenue because they were things that we cared about. They were things that were important to us and were valuable. And I think one thing that we need to make sure we're doing as a county to address both the 1% cap and our regressive tax system is to take a step back and remind ourselves what do we value and what do we get out of reforming our tax system and our tax structure. And that is what we've done when we've gone to the ballot for all of these measures. I've spent, I've knocked on 2,503 doors. And people are okay paying taxes. They want to be fair and they want good things to come out of them. But when we continue to frame the conversation around the mechanism rather than what our values are and what we get out of it, that's where we end up in a situation where year after year we're not passing capital gains taxes, we're not passing income taxes or creating an income tax. And I think the responsibility of the county council on this is to both reframe that conversation. We need to make sure we're not giving up to advocate for these things, but we also need to make sure we're framing these issues around what we're getting. How are we benefiting when we close these inequities? How are we benefiting? And again, I've said this now 1,000 times in this conversation. I've been told by my opponent, I've been told by other leaders that we just can't, we're just too restrained to have these nice things. And I don't buy that. Right? If there are barriers in our way, we map out, we're strategic and creative with messaging and we get it done. And that's what I'm committed to doing.
Thanks, Jason.
Yes, how will you address our community's affordable housing needs and provide more services for those experiencing homelessness?
This is another really important issue and a big reason I'm running for county council. Countywide, we need 244,000 units of low-income affordable housing by 2040. And right now the county doesn't have a plan on how we're going to build that housing. That also doesn't bring into account the middle-income housing we also need that's exacerbating the lack of low-income affordable housing that we desperately need as well. And the council year after year is a task force and plan, and really what they come out of it is is like, hey, we still need this, but no actual funding plan for how we're going to get there. And the model that I think we need to do to address this is exactly what we did on South Transit 3. We had a problem that should have been addressed 20 years ago. Right when ST3, we needed that transit plan 20 years ago. But we need to map out regionally the amount of housing we need, which we know, what it's going to cost, and bring all of the stakeholders necessary to the table to put a price on what it is and how we're going to pay for it. And again, this reflects the same conversation I just talked about before around our tax system. We need to make sure that our largest companies, the wealthiest in our community, are doing their part. We all need to do our part to invest in this, but we were able to fund a $54 billion 20-year transit package. We absolutely should be able to do the same thing for housing. And on transit, what we needed was leadership, right? We would not have had the regional system we were getting without Dow Constantine's leadership. It took years to do it. It took lobbying and legislative effort, and he put his political career on the line to get there. And that is exactly the approach and exactly the leadership we need on housing. And I'm not naive. I know I'm just one person running for a county council position, but I know how to organize. I know how to develop this consensus and bring the community together to get there, and that's the approach we need to be taking.
And Hannah, any questions?
Love to. How will you work to ensure access to affordable health care coverage for low-income Washingtonians?
Ooh, this is actually the first time I've gotten this question. And I've been to many doors and many places. King County runs our mental health system, our King County public health programs, and making sure that we are investing in and doing the outreach necessary to make sure folks have access to all the affordable healthcare options. One of the incredible parts about the Affordable Care Act is King County received a lot of resources from the federal government to do outreach and engagement. Some of that money has been lost with this administration, and making sure we're continuing those efforts and expanding those efforts to enroll as many people as possible. One really neat thing about King County Public Health is that when we created the Orca Lift program, Metro partnered with Public Health to do the enrollment of Orca Lift, so that instead of creating Orca Lifts as a low-income bus fare ticket program. Instead of creating a whole new low-income structure, or structure to enroll folks in that program, Metro worked, essentially contracted with public health to do that enrollment. So the resources were also making sure we were continuing to enroll low-income people in that program, but also, you know, if you were enrolling for healthcare and you hit those income requirements, you were just handed a bus pass. And ensuring that we're maximizing our resources at all levels, that we're integrating all these benefits. When I worked at the city, I fought for years to try to get, I even left the city and kept this fight up, to get our utility discount program to also coordinate with King County Public Health. There are so many benefits available to people that they just aren't coordinated, and the like mad bureaucracy that exists wasn't on the same page. So making sure any resources we're coordinating and using those effectively to maximize how we're getting folks enrolled and giving them access to reliable care.
Thank you. And so now we'll open these up. I saw Matt, you want to go first?
Yeah, so your opponent in this office they're only running for their second term, but they've been in elected office for 27 years, which of course brings with it a ton of resources and institutional knowledge. So my question, just to follow up, is what are some of the resources the district will lose if you win, and what are some of the resources we get?
Yeah. So look, I really respect Councilmember Colell's. I think she's had a really long and incredible career. I also think we're stuck in sort of a status quo. I think the council has been stuck in the status quo. We haven't had competitive elections in this seat or in Seattle elections for 25 years, and frankly, people don't actually know who represents them. I've been in almost every neighborhood in this district knocking on doors, and people have no clue who represents them, no clue who the county council, what the county council is, period. They're very excited somebody's at their door most of the time. But I think that competitive elections are really critical, and I also think, you know, bringing, like, having support and is a demonstration of the status quo, and I'm just not okay with that, right? I think that we need to make sure our democracy is thriving and accessible, and I think that it's not working as is. And I have a lot of respect for Councilmember Colwell, and I'm long career of service.
Thank you. Ben?
Have you signed the People's Moratorium against the youth jail and publicly opposed the youth jail?
I don't know if I actually signed it, but I am opposed to the youth jail. I think it was a mistake for the county council to move forward with that project. I think it was too large, and I think that the county council didn't adequately engage. So if I need to sign it, I will sign it. I didn't adequately engage community members in the development of what facility should be replacing that building. And I also think the council has not done, I mean, it's another example of what like that decision to move forward with the detention facility was made almost 10 years ago. And these decisions the council makes last decades, right? It's not open yet, it'll be open at the end of the year. And we need to roll up our sleeves and make sure that the council is actively engaged in addressing these issues, and I don't think they are. And we need to make sure we're diverting and addressing resources to prevent folks from entering our justice system, make sure we have restorative justice programs.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have you toured the current youth jail, and do you feel that that is actually adequate for youth, for violent offenders, or I don't care how violent you are? I have toured the youth jail. Can you really say you don't want to build a new one?
I'm not saying I don't want to build a new one. I'm saying that I agree. I think that the current facility is atrocious.
Have you been there?
I have not. I've seen the outside of it, and I've heard and I've seen photos of inside. I also don't think I don't think that the facility that they've planned and the community engagement process was appropriate, right? I think that it was too large, and I think that the use of that space was not the best process done. That being said, this building is getting built, it will be replaced, and my role as a county council member is to make sure that we are doing all that we can to get to zero youth detention. And that is what we need to make sure we're doing, and make sure that both the community is safe and make sure that folks, that our youth are given the support they need to make sure that we can prevent folks from entering our detention.
As a follow-up, are you aware that the youth jail, and especially the new larger one, house other programs as well? For example, Step Up for children who abuse their mothers.
Yes.
I saw Brittany, and then Sarah, then Robert.
One of the things that Councilmember Colwell has done a lot of work on is safe consumption sites, and what your perspective is on that.
Yeah, I'm a supporter of safe consumption sites. I think they're a good tool, and I think that they provide the wraparound services and are a really good tool in the toolbox. So I'll continue to support them.
Thank you. Next was Sarah.
So you talked about access to childcare. What is your understanding of the current recommendations of the King County Women's Advisory Board to expand access to childcare? And what would you do differently than what Councilmember Cole is already doing to implement those recommendations? And also, in general, how do you plan on implementing progressive policies when your opponent has been endorsed by the entire King County Council?
Okay, where do I start here?
I was going to
Sorry.
Okay, I'll start with the first one. I've read and reviewed the recommendations from the Women's Commission on childcare. I think they're great recommendations. I think that there are many other things we can also be doing. And one of the big recommendations is to use funding from the Puget Sound Taxpayer Accountability Account, which is a mouthful, but that was a program that was part of Sound Transit 3, so making sure we're leveraging those resources to build, connected transit communities that all have childcare and grocery stores and accessibility. So that's a big priority, and also making sure that those decisions are made not just at the county council, but at the Sound Transit level. And I will fight my ass off to get a seat on the board on the Sound Transit, board. Look, this is all politics, and I understand why the county council members have endorsed Councilmember Colwell. I've spent my career as working with elected officials at all levels, and if I win, I anticipate continuing to build those relationships. I have relationships with all those folks now, and will gladly work with them going forward.
Thank you. Robert, and then Elizabeth.
So you mentioned the opportunities for regional planning around transit, especially with the expiration of the STVD. What are some of the things you would want to advocate for in terms of improved transit service within this council district?
Yeah, well, I mean, the things I've heard on the doors are east-west reliability. I think increasing service. I think going regional is a big part of it, but increasing services. Making sure we have safety features at all of these stations, so we have like sign in, sign off. One of my favorite policies is, this question caught me off guard over the others. Is fare enforcement, right? Metro has done a great job of improving our fare enforcement policies, but I still think they're too strict. I think that we need to make sure we're transitioning fare enforcement to something more like transit ambassadors, and that we're providing tools and resources for folks who are riding that can't afford to pay to have access to healthcare, access to services, and help them navigate the system. And I think I would feel safer on transit if we had transit ambassadors helping people navigate all the many things in our system.
Thank you. Sarah. Sorry, Elizabeth.
Current Councilmember Colwell has made sure twice now that King County money for LEAD make sure to end up in Belltown where it originated and not be converted over to Downtown Seattle Association and other ancillary programs. Will you continue that practice?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Ben?
Do you know how many homeless people live in King County right now?
The one-night count just completed, and I believe it's around 8,000 homeless people.
And of that, do you know what percentage previously resided in the county before they became homeless?
I want to say more than 2/3.
Thank you.
Then, Sarah, one more.
I just wanted to know when you moved into the district, District 4.
Yeah, I moved to the district. I live about 3 blocks south of District 4 in January. I moved in January. But I'm a renter, and I've lived in almost every district, every part of the city, and have worked in the district a long time. And I think the issues and the values that this district care about are ones I've worked with you to fight for. And I can tell you that no one knows who their elected official is right now. I've knocked on 2,500 doors. I plan to knock on another 14,500 doors before the election. And what our voters care about in this district is that they have someone who's there to listen, who's talking to them, and who shares their values, which is to work on and address homelessness and housing, transit and transportation, and our environment, and how we're making sure this is an affordable region for everyone. And, you know, I think that there is not one council member right now who does not want a home on the county council. I want a car, and making sure that voice is on the council, I think, is really important for the decisions that this group is making.
One more question, Matt?
Yeah, so, you know, as a young person who, the average millennial has to move like every year due to rent, I want to ask, what are you going to do to make sure that there's another generation of leadership coming up after you?
I love that question. So I grew up I moved to Seattle to work at the Washington Bus and went through lots of leadership development programs to get to where I am, and have like met with you in the variety of points in my career. I also, it's really important to me to make sure I'm mentoring other young women to engage in campaigns and work in campaigns, and to also know the power that they have to move forward. I'm 29 years old, and I could not be where I am without the amazing mentors I've had, without this amazing community who's invested in me. And I also want to make sure that I'm making space for the next generation to come up. Bridget, my campaign manager, basically had my job at the Bus 8 years ago, and it is so fun to work with somebody who has been through the same leadership programs and is gaining similar experience that I have in this way. And so 8 years from now, she will probably be sitting here running for whatever seat that's challenging someone as well.
Thank you so much. If you would like to go ahead and take 30 seconds to kind of quick little wrap up.
I really want to thank you all for taking the time to meet with me and welcoming me into this community. I know what I'm doing, right? I'm challenging someone that is really deeply respected in this community, and I really respect Councilmember Colwell's as well. I also am running because this is so important to our democracy. This is so important to our moment. This is so important in our world, right? Progress and leadership is action. And I am concerned at the state of our democracy and at the state of our council, and we cannot waste space and have leaders who are not using every ounce of opportunity to make change. And that is what I'm committed and willing to do.
Thank you. Thank you.